I remember the day vividly. A chilly autumn morning in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. The early light seeped through the blinds, painting long stripes on the hardwood floors of our modest home. I, John Carter, had always prided myself on the stability and routine that defined my life. 8 years of marriage to Melissa had woven a tapestry of trust, shared dreams, and an unspoken promise of fidelity. My heart was full, and my days were predictable. A steady job at the local bank, quiet evenings with my wife, and the innocent laughter of our 6-year-old daughter, Lily. That morning, while I was preparing a cup of coffee in the kitchen, I heard Lily's soft voice from the living room. "Daddy, guess what? Mommy said she's meeting Mr. Thomas tonight at the diner." Her bright eyes and excited tone caught me off guard. For a split second, the world stilled. "Mr. Thomas?" I blinked, trying to dismiss the notion. Melissa had never mentioned any Mr. Thomas to me. But as the word sank in, a cold knot of dread and disbelief began to form in the pit of my stomach. I sat down with Lily at the small dining table, forcing a smile as I asked, "What do you mean, Pumpkin?" She explained in her innocent, childlike way that while getting ready for the day, Melissa had talked about meeting someone special at the diner. It was all so casual, so offhand, as if it were a perfectly normal plan. But to me, every word echoed like a verdict. I tried to laugh it off, attributing it to a misunderstanding or a case of mistaken identity. After all, how could my Melissa betray me? Yet, deep inside, a quiet alarm was ringing. The day at work was a blur of numbers and routine, but my mind couldn't shake the morning's revelation. Every laugh, every conversation, every flicker of a memory was suddenly tinted with suspicion. When I returned home that evening, I found Melissa in the living room, seemingly lost in thought. I greeted her warmly, but the smile on her face faltered when our eyes met. It was as if she too sensed the fragile barrier that had just cracked our shared world. I decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, I silently observed, my mind racing with doubts. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, I found Melissa's phone left on the kitchen counter. My hands trembled as I picked it up and, on a whim that I would later regret, unlocked it. There, amidst a string of benign messages, lay a series of texts from someone named T. Walker. The messages were flirtatious, laced with intimate details and a promise of secret rendezvous. The realization was brutal. Melissa had been deceiving me, and our daughter had unwittingly exposed the first crack of our family's foundation. Sleep did not come easily that night. In the quiet darkness, I wrestled with a storm of emotions. Disbelief, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. How had I been so blind? The trust one had placed in her, the years we'd spent building a life together, all seemed to crumble in an instant. I felt like a stranger in my own home, haunted by memories of smiles and shared secrets that now felt tainted by lies. As dawn broke the next day, I resolved to understand the extent of her deception. I combed through her phone, emails, and even social media, each piece of evidence stitching together a narrative of clandestine meetings and hidden promises. The more I uncovered, the deeper I sank into despair and fury. The thought that my little Lily might one day learn the truth gnawed at me. Yet, amidst the swirling emotions, something else began to take root, a dark, relentless desire for retribution. I recalled every small detail from that morning. The tone of Lily's voice, the sparkle in her eyes when she recounted what her mother had said. It was as if an innocent comment had unraveled the fabric of my entire existence. In that moment, my world was no longer defined by the mundane routine of everyday life. Instead, it had shifted into a realm of calculated vengeance and cold determination. I knew that I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. I spent the remainder of the day in a haze, methodically planning my next steps. Every image, every whispered conversation I had shared with Melissa now held a double meaning. The comfortable home we had built felt more like a fortress of lies, each room echoing with the ghosts of our past happiness. With every passing moment, my inner resolve grew stronger. I began to envisage a future where the pain she had inflicted on me would be repaid in full, a future where I would not be the broken, silent victim by nightfall. I had taken the first step on a path that would change me forever. I signed up at a local gym known for its rigorous training programs. Under the guise of reclaiming my health, I began to train my body with an intensity I'd never known before. Every punch thrown, every drop of sweat was an act of defiance against the betrayal that had shattered my heart. In that gym, amid the clamor of weights and the rhythm of boxing gloves against punching bags, I felt something else awaken within me, a raw, primal need for physical retribution. As I left the gym that evening, my mind was abuzz with the thought of confronting the man who had stolen my wife's loyalty. The notion of facing T. Walker, or whoever this mysterious man might be, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I wasn't just planning to expose the affair. I was planning to inflict a lesson in pain, one that would resonate for a lifetime. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the faces of my once-beloved family flashed before my eyes. Melissa's gentle smile, Lily's innocent laughter. I wondered how those images would look once stained by the memories of this betrayal. And deep down, despite the burning need for revenge, I felt a pang of regret for the life I was about to shatter. But the hurt was too deep, the wound too raw. There was no going back now. I was on a collision course with destiny, and every thought, every heartbeat, echoed with the promise of retribution. In the days that followed the revelation, I immersed myself in a world I had never before known, the world of clandestine investigation. I retraced every message, every secret rendezvous, and every whispered phone call. It wasn't long before I uncovered a pattern. Melissa's absences, her unexplained late nights, and the discreet meetings at the corner diner all pointed to a well-orchestrated affair. The evidence was irrefutable. Yet, the deeper I dug, the more I realized that the betrayal extended beyond just Melissa. It was a carefully woven web that implicated more than one man. That my training at the gym continued unabated. Early mornings found me on the boxing ring, my knuckles hardening with each jab, each hook, a physical manifestation of my inner turmoil. I adopted a strict regimen, not only to build muscle, but to forge the determination that would soon fuel my vengeance. Between sessions, I pored over every scrap of evidence I'd gathered, piecing together a timeline of deception. The name T. Walker surfaced repeatedly, a man who, by all accounts, seemed charming and successful. But behind the charm lay the calculated cunning of a man who had no qualms about betraying another's trust. I began to tail Melissa discreetly. It was a cold evening when I followed her car down winding suburban roads to a nondescript diner on the edge of town. From my vantage point in a darkened parking lot, I watched as she entered, her face calm yet distant. I recorded every detail. The vehicle that pulled up beside her, the hurried exchange of glances, and the quiet intimacy that passed between her and a man in a tailored suit. My heart pounded, not just with anger, but with a grim satisfaction as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. At home, the tension was palpable. I maintained a facade of normalcy for Lily's sake, though every smile I forced masked the storm raging inside me. The secret I carried was a burden too heavy for words, a promise of vengeance that was consuming my every thought. I began planning encounters, not just with Melissa, but with T. Walker as well. I tracked his routines, learned of his haunts, and discovered that he frequented a particular upscale bar downtown. It was there I decided that I would finally confront him face to face. Before that confrontation could take shape, I needed more than just anger. I needed the physical prowess to back it up. I spent hours in the gym, pushing my limits, conditioning my body for the fight ahead. Each bruise, each drop of sweat became a testament to my resolve. I had never imagined that the man I once was, a man of quiet words and gentle affection, could be remade into something capable of unleashing raw, unbridled violence. One sleepless night, as I sat alone in my study surrounded by scattered photographs of happier times, I found myself drawn to an old leather-bound journal. In its pages, I scribbled my thoughts, a mixture of sorrow, fury, and the cold promise of retribution. I wrote about the betrayal, about how an innocent comment from Lily had shattered my world. I wrote about the inevitability of pain, not just for Melissa and her lover, but for every lie that had been told in our home. Each word I penned was a vow. I would reclaim the honor that had been stolen from me, even if it meant destroying everything in its wake. By the end of that week, the plan was in motion. I mapped out the movements of T. Walker, noted the times he visited the bar, and prepared my strategy for that inevitable confrontation. Every detail was scrutinized. I even began to consider the collateral, ensuring that Lily would remain untouched by the storm I was summoning. In my heart, the mission was clear. Retribution was not merely a reaction to betrayal. It was a declaration that I would never again be the victim of someone else's deceit. The days blended into nights as I oscillated between my dual lives, the devoted father and the cold, calculating avenger. In the silence of my living room, while Lily slept soundly upstairs, I would rehearse the confrontation in my mind. I envisioned a scenario where T. Walker's suave exterior melted away under the force of my fury. The thought of making him feel even a fraction of the pain I had endured drove me further into my obsessive planning. I began to question the nature of love and trust. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a battleground strewn with the remnants of broken promises. The more I uncovered, the less I could reconcile the woman I had loved with the one who had betrayed me so thoroughly. The world was no longer black and white. It was a labyrinth of deception, where every smile hid a secret, and every word was a lie waiting to be exposed. And so, as dusk fell one evening, and I watched the sky bleed shades of crimson, I made a silent pledge to myself. There would be no turning back. I had accepted the role fate had thrust upon me, the avenger, the executioner of deceit. The path ahead was dark, fraught with uncertainty and the potential for irrevocable destruction. But I would walk it, step by relentless step, until justice was served. That in the weeks that followed, my life became a study in contrasts. By day, I maintained the facade of the doting father and loving husband, diligently attending work and playing along in our quiet suburban life. But by night, the fire of vengeance blazed within me. I spent countless hours planning, training, and preparing for the moment when I would finally confront the man who had dared to share in Melissa's betrayal. My routine had grown rigorous. Early mornings were reserved for physical training. Long runs through the chilly streets of Ohio, grueling sessions at the gym, and evenings of boxing practice that left my body aching and my resolve hardened like steel. Each bruise and every drop of sweat was a mark of my transformation, from the gentle soul who once believed in unconditional love to a man fueled by a singular, unyielding purpose. Revenge. During one such training session at an old, dimly lit boxing gym, I met a seasoned trainer named Ray. His grizzled face and piercing eyes reflected years of hardship and combat. "Son, pain is the teacher," he told me as he adjusted my stance. "Learn from it, or it'll break you." I nodded, not fully understanding, but knowing that every lesson was forging me into a weapon. Ray became an unlikely mentor, and under his tutelage, I honed not only my physical strength, but also my tactical mind. With my body prepared, I turned my attention to the enemy. T. Walker, now revealed as Thomas Walker, was a man of refinement and ease, always seen in tailored suits, exuding confidence and charm. But I had learned that beneath his polished exterior lay a dangerous arrogance. I began frequenting the upscale bar where he spent his nights, a dim, modern establishment filled with the clink of glasses and murmured conversations. I watched from a corner booth, studying his mannerisms, the way he interacted with women, and even noting the subtle shifts in his posture that betrayed moments of vulnerability. It wasn't long before I found an opportunity. One Friday evening, as the bar's neon lights flickered against the dark windows, I saw Thomas laughing heartily with a group of colleagues. The sight only stoked the embers of my anger. I slipped out and followed him discreetly as he left the bar. My heart pounded as I trailed him through winding back streets until he arrived at an upscale hotel. The prospect of finally facing him sent a thrill of anticipation coursing through my veins. I parked a few blocks away and watched as he checked in. I knew that this moment could be the turning point in my plan. If I could get inside, if I could make him pay even a fraction of the pain he had inflicted in the days leading up to that night, I delved even deeper into the labyrinth of Melissa's betrayal. I discovered more details about their secret meetings, the locations, the timings, and even glimpses of conversations that hinted at a deeper, more intimate connection. Every piece of information was meticulously recorded in a battered notebook. It was a dossier of deceit, a ledger of lies, and it fueled my determination. I was no longer simply a husband betrayed. I was an avenger on a mission to restore my dignity by inflicting a reckoning that would resonate long after the wounds had healed. Yet, even as I steeled myself for the forthcoming confrontation, a lingering thought gnawed at the edges of my resolve. I wondered if, in my quest for retribution, I was sacrificing a part of myself, if the man I was becoming would be forever lost in the pursuit of vengeance. But the answer was clear every time I thought of Lily's innocent eyes and the trust that had been shattered in our home. This was not just about me. It was about reclaiming the honor and security that had been so callously stripped away late one night while revisiting old photos of Melissa and me, the happier times, the promises whispered in the dark. I felt a profound sense of loss. The warm glow of love had been replaced by the cold, harsh light of betrayal. Yet that loss only further ignited the fire within me. I resolved then and there that my transformation was irreversible. There was no return to the man I once was. I had become something far more dangerous. A man willing to do whatever it took to make those who wronged me suffer, armed with my newfound physical strength and the painstaking details of a conspiracy. I crafted a plan. It was simple yet ruthless. Confront Thomas Walker directly, make him feel the sting of my wrath, and send a message that betrayal would never go unpunished. Every day brought me closer to that inevitable night, and with each passing hour, my anticipation grew. I practiced scenarios in my head, calculating every blow, every twist, every moment of vulnerability I could exploit in the solitude of my study. I began to rehearse dialogues and plan my exit strategy. I knew that once I set this plan in motion, there would be no turning back. The calm veneer of suburban life was crumbling, replaced by the storm of vengeance that now defined my every thought. I closed my eyes and imagined the confrontation, the sound of fists meeting flesh, the taste of retribution in the air, and the finality of a man broken by his own hubris. As the night of reckoning approached, I found a strange sense of clarity amidst the chaos of my emotions. Every step I took, every plan I made, was a step away from the man I once was, and a step toward the avenger I needed to become. My world had been irrevocably altered by one innocent comment from my daughter, a comment that had shattered illusions and set me on a path I could no longer escape. The night had come. The air was thick with anticipation as I parked my car a few blocks from the hotel. Every nerve in my body was electrified by the knowledge that I was on the precipice of a long-awaited reckoning. I waited in the shadows, the neon reflections dancing on the wet pavement, until I saw Thomas Walker emerge from the hotel lobby. His polished appearance, his confident stride, all of it now felt like a provocation, an insult that demanded retribution. I trailed him at a careful distance, my heart hammering in my chest as I navigated the maze of dimly lit alleys. The city had a way of swallowing its secrets, and tonight I intended to spit them out in a torrent of violence. When Thomas finally turned down a narrow side street, I made my move. I stepped out of the darkness, silent and deliberate, until I was just a few feet away from him. "Thomas Walker," I called out, my voice low and steady. He stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowing as he turned toward me. For a brief moment, I saw surprise in his gaze, quickly replaced by a smug, almost amused smile. "And you are?" he asked, his tone light, as if he were addressing an inconvenience rather than an imminent threat. "I'm John Carter," I replied, my voice dripping with cold finality. "I think we have some unfinished business." Before he could react, I lunged forward. The confrontation exploded into a flurry of violence in the narrow confines of that dim alley. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and every muscle in my body acted with precision. Fists flew, and the sound of flesh colliding with flesh echoed off the brick walls. Thomas was fast, his training in the corporate world of self-defense evident in his movements, but I was driven by something far more potent than mere physical strength. My fury was a force of nature. The fight was brutal and raw. I delivered punishing blows, each one a manifestation of the betrayal I'd suffered, while Thomas countered with desperate agility. There were moments when I felt his fingers clawing at my face, his well-manicured nails raking my skin, but I refused to relent. The taste of vengeance was all that fueled me, and I was determined to leave him broken. In the heat of the battle, the world reduced itself to the rhythm of violence. The thud of my fists, the grunts of exertion, and the rapid beat of my heart. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity in that dim alley, I managed to subdue him. With one final, decisive blow, I sent him sprawling against the cold, unforgiving concrete. As he lay there, gasping for air, his eyes filled with a mixture of shock and pain, I leaned in close. "This is for every lie, every stolen moment, and every tear that fell because of you," I hissed. The words were meant for him, but in truth, they carried the weight of years of betrayal. For a long moment, I considered ending it there, allowing him to suffer the consequences of his actions in solitude. But the dark promise I had made demanded more, a reminder that betrayal would be met with unyielding punishment. I left him battered and broken, a living testament to the retribution I had unleashed. The confrontation, however, was only one piece of the puzzle. I knew that the ultimate target lay not solely in Thomas Walker, but in the entire network of deceit that had upended my life. That night, as I made my way back to my car through deserted streets, I allowed myself a brief moment of grim satisfaction. The physical toll of the fight was evident in the bruises forming on my skin, but each mark was a badge of honor, a symbol of the price that treachery demanded. But even as I drove away from that dark alley, a chill crept over me. In the back of my mind, I could still hear Lily's innocent voice and see Melissa's once loving smile. The lines between justice and revenge blurred in the depths of my soul. I had taken a step that could never be undone, and I was acutely aware that there was no turning back. The thirst for vengeance was an insatiable beast, and tonight it had been fed. I parked my car far from the chaos of that confrontation and spent a long while in silence, the cool night air mingling with the warmth of my exertions. I realized that while I had inflicted pain on Thomas, the journey to truly reclaiming my dignity was only beginning. The betrayal was too deep to be undone with a single act of violence, and the network of lies still stretched out before me like a treacherous labyrinth. In the aftermath of that fateful night, as dawn crept over the horizon and the city began to stir, I found myself alone with the echoes of my actions. The battered form of Thomas Walker had long since been removed from that narrow alley, and yet the weight of what I had done pressed down on me with every step I took. I returned home, walking the familiar streets of our quiet neighborhood with a heavy heart and a mind clouded by both satisfaction and sorrow. Inside our home, the silence was deafening. Melissa had not yet returned, and Lily slept in her room, unaware of the violence that had unfolded just blocks away. I moved through the house like a ghost, each memory of happier times now tinged with the bitter tang of betrayal and retribution. I knew that what I had done was irreversible. There was no undoing the choices that had led me down this dark path. The man I once was buried beneath the layers of anger and resolve, replaced by someone far more dangerous and unpredictable. Days turned into weeks as I struggled to reconcile my inner turmoil. The physical scars from that night slowly faded, but the deeper wounds, etched into the fabric of my soul, remained raw and unhealed. I began to wonder if the vengeance I had so ruthlessly pursued had truly brought me the closure I had sought, or if it had only plunged me deeper into an abyss of unending despair. Late one evening, as I sat alone in the study, I reviewed the battered notebook that had once contained every detail of Melissa's betrayals. The pages were now stained with ink and memories, a ledger of a life destroyed by lies. I traced the lines with my finger, each word a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. In that moment, I felt the weight of responsibility, not only for the man I had become, but for the life that remained. My thoughts drifted to Lily, whose innocence had unwittingly been the catalyst for all of this. The idea that she might someday learn the truth filled me with a silent, gnawing dread. I had set a course for vengeance that might forever alter the lives of those I loved, yet, despite the lingering shadows of regret, a part of me recognized that there was no redemption to be found in turning back. The path of retribution had been chosen, and with every blow delivered, I had forged a new identity, a warrior who would not allow betrayal to go unanswered. Melissa's infidelities and Thomas Walker's arrogance had awakened a side of me that I never knew existed, a side that thrived in the chaos of punishment and the cold satisfaction of revenge. In the weeks that followed, I took deliberate steps to dismantle the network of deceit that had once intertwined our lives. I confronted acquaintances who had aided in covering up Melissa's misdeeds. I gathered every scrap of evidence that could serve as a final testament to the betrayal, and I began to plan for a future where the truth could no longer be buried under layers of lies. There was a grim satisfaction in knowing that the consequences of those actions would eventually ripple outwards, affecting everyone who had played a part in our downfall. Yet, even as I pursued this path, I found myself haunted by the faces of the past, Melissa's tearful eyes, Lily's confused frown, and even Thomas Walker's broken gaze in that dark alley. The physical retribution had been swift and brutal, but the emotional scars ran deeper than any bruise. I often spent sleepless nights questioning whether I had truly regained control or merely traded one form of bondage for another. In the final, long hours of one particularly quiet night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights shimmer like distant stars. The cold, clear air seemed to whisper of inevitabilities, that every act of violence would eventually demand its due, that every betrayal would be repaid in kind. I knew that I was now irrevocably entwined with a destiny that was as dark as it was inescapable. The journey of vengeance had transformed me, leaving behind the man who once believed in unconditional love. I resolved then to continue on this treacherous path, not out of blind hatred, but because I had come to understand that some wounds could never be healed by forgiveness alone. The price of betrayal was measured in blood and broken trust, and I was determined to see that justice, however brutal, was served. The process of reclaiming my dignity was a long, arduous one, and I braced myself for the inevitable trials ahead. As the first rays of dawn began to cut through the darkness, I closed the notebook and prepared to face another day. The memories of that night, the physical battle, and the relentless pursuit of retribution would remain etched in my mind, a constant reminder of what it cost to be betrayed. Yet, in that same moment, I vowed to protect the remnants of the life I still had, especially for Lily, whose innocent world deserved a future unmarred by the consequences of deceit. I understood now that vengeance was a double-edged sword. It had given me a semblance of power, a way to challenge the forces that had torn my world apart. But it had also carved deep scars into my soul, scars that would forever alter the way I saw love, trust, and the price of betrayal. With a heavy heart and unwavering resolve, I stepped out into the new day, carrying the weight of my choices, and the bitter hope that, somewhere beyond the darkness, there might yet be a path to redemption.